Little update here on the active weather we have going on, as well as a little update on the tropics too, because we have an area of interest to watch. It's really not anything to develop until we get later on into the week, but we already have the disturbed weather going on. So we'll start off with the radar analysis here with what we have currently going on. We've got kind of a general broad cyclonic spin here that is across the southeast, and we have an incoming frontal boundary that is draped across the middle section of the country. That's going to work down, and as it works into our area, that's going to help to push this area of disturbed weather further into the Gulf as well as out into the Atlantic. Now today the modeling here, I'm going to turn this off so you're not all distracted by the lightning. The modeling today is showing a better chance of something trying to get developed on the Atlantic side, but it's possible that that flips back to the Gulf side. It really doesn't matter here, to be completely honest. We're probably talking about something that's broad or weak to begin with. It may try to work down to the surface at least briefly, but the favorable conditions only last for a very short period of time before we get high pressure to build in here, which is going to help to push everything back out in that direction. Or as you'll note, high pressure systems is a clockwise flow. So if this ends up back further off to the south and east, we could see a low pressure get stuck over here and then try to track back this way as our next incoming trough comes in. It may try to pull that system that way. So it's plausible that you see something develop close to Florida and then track back across, then high pressure builds in, kind of pushes that back across as well. But in general, we're talking about a sloppy rainmaker here. Unlikely to see something rapidly intensify and make it all the way down to the surface. Just doesn't seem all that likely at this point in time. So going over here to our full screen on links, just to get back to our data so we can give you a better idea of what we have in the tropics. And of course, we do have Flossie out there, nearly a hurricane at this point in time, working in the Eastern Pacific. And we will likely see the Eastern Pacific stay very, very active because we're going to see the Madden-Julian oscillation stay in phase 4 and 5, or at least build into phase 4 and 5. And what that does is that favors the Eastern Pacific. And when the Eastern Pacific is favored, that really cuts down on the favorability across the Caribbean as well as the Gulf. However, we have decently favorable conditions right now across the northeastern portion of the Gulf. And with the water vapor imagery here, you can see that broad cyclonic spin just on the west side of the high pressure system, kind of the interaction between the flow and land as well as the trough starting to dig in. So when this next trough that is back here around St. Louis, really can see the dry line between Denver going all the way up to Hudson Bay there with the next system, that is going to be digging in. That should help to enhance this disturbed weather as is, if not push it a little further to the south or a little further off to the east. So likelihood that we see anything develop here is pretty slim, just a 20% chance at it. We may see that trend up if things start to become a little better organized. Like I said, the Euro here kind of splitting the difference between the GFS and the other modeling, saying a broad general cyclonic spin develops right over the peninsula, but never really gets going. And if it does, it's probably on the Atlantic side, and then that gets all stretched out by the trough itself. Now, what is controlling the Atlantic at this point in time? Well, it is Saharan dust and unfavorable upper level winds. A lot of that has to do with the conditions that are currently present. But you can see, even on the Saharan dust here, that trough digging in, clearing out a little space or pocket across the Gulf that would present some favorable conditions without dry air present. But downstream, or upstream, depending on which way you're looking at it, we can see that there is plenty of Saharan dust on the way. So that's going to continue to tamper out anything that is trying to develop out in the middle of the Atlantic, as well as in the main development region down here. Just too much dry air and shear to contend with at this point in time. Now the GFS, a little bit different than what we have as far as the Euro. You'll see that there's a relatively broad area of spin, but because the GFS favors stronger troughs and weaker high pressure systems, it doesn't really pull it further off to the east. It kind of just keeps it meandered across the trough here itself, and then break it off just off to our south. But it never really gets going just because of the interaction with land, and then it's kind of sitting here between Jacksonville and Panama City, that broad cyclonic spin. And by the time we get our next frontal boundary to come in here, it is completely gone, with the subtropical ridge building back and high pressure building back across the Gulf as well. So more heat, more humidity, as well as the unstable weather where we're getting our daily showers and thunderstorms. And I always like looking at the water vapor imagery here because that gives you a really good idea of what you're looking at as far as what's going on. So we'll go over to that and we'll get a better idea of what we have here. So you can see that this broad cyclonic spin is here. That's actually with a high pressure system in control right there, as we just saw. And then we have another broad cyclonic spin that is basically over the top of Panama City at this point in time. And then the flow is out of the north and west with our incoming frontal boundary here. So these two things all really kind of in a very small pocket of favorability because what's left of Barry is still over here. And then obviously you can see Flossie with a little developing eye there trying to get going across that water vapor imagery. But thankfully, Flossie is going to head in that direction. And this is cold water. So that will die pretty quickly. And then the next storm system should send shear all across this area. So unlikely to see much of anything going on. We will continue to see frontal boundaries here. So this may not be the last time that we try to see something develop along the Gulf Stream or in the northern Gulf. And with that, we'll just have to continue to watch. But just want to put your mind at ease just a little bit here that really there's not a whole lot going on. And when you can see the water vapor imagery, you can see that pretty clearly. In fact, at the way things are setting up, I think the Euro is probably right. This is probably a much more favorable pocket for something to develop than something down here, just based on what's going on now. But as we get later into the week, we may see that this translates further over here or vice versa. But either way, we're not talking about something that's just going to rapidly spin down to the surface and develop, which is why you're only seeing a 20% chance at tropical development at this point in time. So that's really all I have to say. If you're not following me across my social media platforms, please do so. Whitley Weather or on Twitter and Facebook, and then Whitley Weather and the redundancy WX on the end of Whitley Weather because apparently Whitley Weather was taken on Instagram. So I went 2 for 3, not too bad. But that's it. We'll check back in. We'll probably have a Tropic Topics later on this week as well. So be on the lookout for that. As I will likely do one later this week, especially if we start to see something trending up here as far as tropical development or the possibility of some kind of tropical system.